WorldDenver talks today with Dr. Kakenya Ntaiya. Welcome to Denver. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So for those that aren't as familiar with your story and your background, I thought it would be good to start with a little bit about what your journey has been. So can you take us back and just share a little bit of that initial journey with folks?
I grew up in a small village in southwestern Kenya. For those who've been to Kenya, it's around the Masai Mara. And growing up there, I'm the first of 8 in my family. Being the first of 8, I grew up in a village where there was no running water, no electricity. Just we are nomads, so cows was what measures your wealth. And I grew up in a family that actually in my community we were not considered wealthy because we didn't have a lot of cows. And my dad actually worked as a policeman, but he lived in the city, so he would come home once a year, but we never saw him often. But when I was 5 years old, I found out that I was engaged to a young man from my neighborhood. And it was a good thing because my mom was very hardworking. So the family saw that together I would be a good wife to their son because my mother is the one who is training me to be a good. So I'll have the same qualities as my mother. So growing there, I went to school. My mom dropped out of school and to get married and have us. And she always told us that she never wanted us to live the life she was living. And she also told us that she never wanted us to grow up to be like her. So one is that she knew if she had gone to school, she would have had a different life. Because people she was with in school were doing so much. The men, they were doing much better. One of them was like a member of parliament. Some worked in the bank. And she said, I was smarter than them. And if I had gone to school, I wouldn't be living in a difficult life. What do I mean by a difficult life? We depended mostly on cows, and sometimes we learned how to farm. So there was really no source of income other than drinking milk. And because we didn't have a lot of cows, we were not even able to produce enough to sell. So what we had is milk. And if we needed extra food, we had to work in the farm. Something that is not a Maasai thing. But my mom really was out and she said, we're going to try. And we learned how to dig farm, which is hard. And it was not enough. Sometimes we spend the night without food. And being the first, I was always left out. So when I saw the life that my mother was living, it was really difficult. But the worst was when my dad was home. You would think that because he's been away, we would really miss him and we would be very excited to have him. But when he came home, he would, sell the products we had or, sell the cows that we had. And he would go and drink with his friends and he would come home and really beat my mother, abuse her. It was very painful for me to see that because my mother is a woman, she doesn't own anything and she can't question my dad. She is more like a child and a property to him. So if she misbehaved, she gets beaten. So it was a difficult life. Many times I went to rescue my mother. So I went to school and I said, look, to make a difference, I was going to pursue education, to live a different life than my mother's.
So education and seeing the conditions that your mother faced, what other girls in the community faced, what was ahead for you being engaged so early in your life, was that really the catalyst that you think propelled you to be able to overcome all of that struggle and do what you do now? Yes,
I went to school. When I went to school, I met teachers and met female teachers who I always tell people that what really attracted me to them is that they were wearing different dresses every day and they changed their shoes. And as a young girl who didn't have many clothes, I had 3 clothes, one for school, one for working at home, and one for church. So I wanted a variety of clothes. And So I really wanted, and then the most is like, I saw them as, they had independence. They could earn an income every month, and all they did is come to school looking nice and write on the board. So that was really that job that I wanted to. But even being in school, it's not as easy to just dream I want to become a teacher and it happens, because everybody around you believes that you're going to be married anyway, so including your teachers. So, and the roles that we do at home of sweeping the house, collecting firewood, cooking, most of the time we are told to do that at school as well. So when the boys are in class reading, the girls are going to collect water from the river. And you're really put into that place that this is your end thing. And my best friend got married when we were in 6th grade. And it was very difficult for me, because the girl that I ate, we went to lunch together, we played together, and all of a sudden she was a wife. When I was in 7th grade, she had a baby. So that itself, I just saw hopelessness. So I wanted to just stick in and just go for education.
How do you balance the cultural traditions that we have and that we value in the different communities we come from, with also challenging the injustices we see and working toward progress? How do you keep that balance?
It's a difficult one. For example, in my community, the practice of female genital cutting is a human rights violation. It's something that it's violence against women, and not just women, it's actually violence against young girls. And yet in the society is seen as something that is what makes you a woman. So it's really difficult to cut that line. Our Maasai people, we dress, we have beautiful ornaments, the red, the tradition that I would like to keep, in terms of beadwork, storytellings from grandmothers to younger generation. I would love to keep that. But how do you tell a society that has been practicing female genital cutting and marrying their daughters when they are 10 years or 12-year-old that is wrong? What has been an advantage to me is that I grew up in the society. They saw me go through the hurdles, and now what I do is that they say, oh, you grew up, you actually know what it means when I say female genital cutting is wrong, and so that has been an advantage for me. And what I've really has been a very key thing, and I think for every society, education is really very important. And I mean not just a classroom education, it's really an all-rounded education, where if you are not educated, you're really left out. Yes, you can have access to advocacy, you can have access to the law, but it can't reach you if you're not educated. You are really taken advantage of. I work with, right now when we educate our village men about female genital cutting, these are people who never went to class, and they're looking at me like, really, those things happen? And when we start having a dialogue with the women and talking about actually what happened to them, and they're like, yeah, I do feel that way. And they never connected it to even FGM, or they never connected that the way they live is because maybe they got married when they're 12, 13-year-olds, and now this is how they are. And they've never connected it because they're not educated. So to me, it is really the opening place, because then we can have a discussion. But if you don't have access, you're really left out.
How can we here in the United States, in the work that we do around girls' empowerment, how can we be advocates and allies?
I think I've been fortunate to live in this country for many years, in the US, and what we do here is really protect our daughters, protect our children. We don't want them to hear that there's a certain thing that happens to girls, that they are age mates in another country. We really don't want them to know that. But what we fail to know is that these same girls are going to be leaders tomorrow. So if you don't tell them what other girls in another world is facing, how are they supposed to know to implement the right things and stand with them? however much we protect our girls, which is great, I protect my daughters very much, but I expose them. I tell them what actually happens. And here in this country, there are girls who are subjected to female genital cutting because they're immigrants, they come from Africa, or they come from whatever country that is practicing, and they take them home, they mutilate them, they bring them to the same classroom as your daughter, and something happens there. And if your daughter doesn't know about it or is exposed to some of these things, really, how is she going to be helpful to that friend of hers that they watch a movie together, that they go to class together? So it is good to expose them, and even if we don't expose them, there are issues that we in this country, there's a lot of teenage pregnancy, which is the same common thing that happens in my country. And teenage pregnancy happens not because of consent, it's because of a rape, because she's under 18. So if we don't talk about those violence that happens within teenagers, how do we even protect them? So it's very important that we really, really give this information to our young kids.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us here in Denver.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.